Hello and welcome to South to North, bringing you the voices of the global South from Johannesburg. Today we talk about forbidden love, not the type of love which ended so tragically for Romeo and Juliet, but love of a more unconventional nature, love between two people of the same sex. It's not long ago the world was shocked to see Ugandan gay activist David Kato murdered after being identified on the front page of a national tabloid. An international outcry followed, but not powerful enough to stop MPs debating a bill that could soon make homosexual acts punishable by death. Making love a crime, a recent Amnesty International study reveals that 38 countries in Africa alone have criminal sanctions against consensual same-sex conduct. And in the last decade, violence against people perceived to be in same-sex unions has steadily increased. With me in the studio are Whitney Brown, who heads up Amnesty International's Law and Policy Program, and Claire Byarugaba from the Ugandan Coalition on Human Rights and Constitutional Law. And also joining us later is South African MP Prince Pategile Holomisa. Welcome to the program. Whitney, let's start with you. You were involved in putting together this report by Amnesty International. What have you found?
Well, we wanted to look at what are the consequences of criminalization of same-sex sexual conduct. And we did case studies in 4 countries. We looked at Kenya, Uganda, Cameroon, and South Africa. And we found that one of the consequences of criminalization is not only what happens when the government enforces those laws, which can be fines, imprisonment, including up to life imprisonment, flogging or other forms of corporal punishment, and in a few cases, the death penalty, but also the cascading consequences. Children are kicked out of schools, people are evicted from their homes, families often kick them out also, employment can be difficult. So we wanted to make the point that you actually create a hostile environment that has implications for a full range of a person's human rights.
Are things getting better or worse?
What we're seeing now is as people step forward and say, I want to claim my rights, I want to have the equal protection of the law, I don't want to hide who I am, that you often get a backlash. And this is not unique to this group of people. Anytime a group of people steps up and says, we're claiming our rights, we're demanding equality, oftentimes the response is brutal. So in that sense, we are seeing increase in attacks as you see communities stepping forward and demanding their rights. But there's also reason for optimism. First of all, there are some countries who've never criminalized it, and you have some countries who are actually changing their laws, including ending discrimination in employment, a couple that are actually repealing the laws that criminalize homosexual conduct, et cetera. So it's a mixed picture, and I think that we should not see the increase in violence as purely negative. Certainly the consequences are horrific, but it is about a group of people standing up and said, we want our rights.
Claire, let's bring you in here. You're a lawyer, you're living in a country that has criminalized same-sex relationships. What's it like?
We have a situation where people in power that are supposed to protect, you as a vulnerable population or as the other minority group, criminalizing you and with complete disregard of your human rights as a person.
Is their conduct or even the legislation that they propose and pass, is it a reflection on the attitudes from the larger society? In other words, in an environment where there is homophobia, where people are seeing you as a pariah, less than a human being, so the MPs are actually reflecting the attitudes of the larger society?
I completely disagree that, for example, the anti-homosexuality bill does not reflect the views of the general population. No one was consulted about this bill. It was religious leaders and MPs who, sat together and decided we need a stronger law to recriminalize homosexuality, simply because of the incitement again from US conservative religious leaders who came to Uganda and spread this very poisonous propaganda about what the gay agenda is. For example, they told MPs, police officers, and other members of the community, and they were told that homosexuals don't have the ability to have adult same-sex relationships. They are pedophiles. They're out to get your children. that traditional marriage is in danger. You know, so that was the message that went out.
Hold on. Are you saying that the attitudes of the Western countries were imported
Exactly.
to influence the response of Ugandan
Yes.
MPs?
So the common knowledge or the common propaganda that homosexuality is a Western import is completely wrong. It's rather that homophobia is imported into Uganda, for example, because Ugandans are generally tolerant people. You know, they have so many other issues to deal with.
So it's the homophobia that's imported,
Yes.
not being a homosexual.
Yes.
But I just want to understand day-to-day processes. I spoke earlier about the horrific murder of David Kato. One would have imagined that would galvanize a society to come up with more democratic and compassionate laws. Are lesbians and gay people in Uganda still being named and shamed by newspapers and magazines?
Very much, because I think 2 months ago, there was like a headline in the local tabloid saying these are the gay recruiters. Unfortunately, I was among them. They listed names, organizations of these supposed gay recruiters and what their agenda is. And this has so much backlash, you know, to the work we do.
Is it in all of Uganda, or there's a distinction between rural and urban Uganda in the way it responds to gay people?
It's mostly urban, because that's where the organizing is mostly. In the rural areas, they are hearing about this because, you know, the anti-homosexuality bill was tabled, and all of a sudden a dialogue began about these issues. Who are these people? You know, so originally, a person who had a gay neighbor, for example, and he allowed him to play with his children without regard that, you know, without this knowledge, you know, from the religious leaders and political leaders who said they're out to get your children. That changed after, you know, this knowledge was spread out into the public, that this is the agenda.
So they're seeing homosexuals as threatening their cultural values
Exactly.
and identity. Is there a difference in the manifestation of this criminalizing homosexuality in rural areas and in urban areas, or do people respond the same?
I think in the urban areas where there's more traditional organizing of groups who are standing up to claim their rights is often where you will see more of the confrontation happening.
Because I'm always wary of depicting rural areas of being anti-gays, because here in South Africa, the murders of lesbians have happened in urban areas, in the townships, in the cities, and so on. All right, let's explore this notion of the perceived conflict between homosexuality and traditional values. While gay people here in South Africa are indeed protected by our constitution, the majority of our religious and traditional leaders are staunchly opposed to it. We are now joined by ANC MP Prince Patekile Holomisa, who's also the president of South Africa's Congress of Traditional Leaders. Welcome. Welcome. Does homosexuality pose a threat to African values?
A great many people believe so.
What do you believe as the Congress of Traditional Leaders?
Well, we are the custodians of the traditions and cultures of the people that we lead.
In what way do they perceive homosexuality to be a threat to African values?
Well, of course, it's unconventional. It goes against the understood natural order of human behavior. Because it's expected that it will be people of opposite sex who will have sexual relations with each other. Because there's a purpose for sexual relations, to build families, to have children.
So what do we do then in this situation where we're living in a country that has a constitution that recognizes the right to sexual orientation? You've been a member of a party that has promoted and put together that kind of constitution. Should the right to sexual orientation have been left out of this current constitution?
Well, the people who were consulted before this bill was passed into law, Same-Sex Union Act, as well as the traditional leaders, are opposed to the legalization of same-sex unions. When the provision in the Constitution was included, the one to the effect that there should be no discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, it was on the they never opposed it as strongly as they later felt they should have, because they didn't expect that it would go to the extent of allowing and promoting same-sex marriages.
Okay.
Because they understood, they still understand that you do have people who get attracted to people of the same sex as they are. But they have an understanding of how that comes about and how that should be dealt with. Mm-hmm. But it's not supposed to be addressed by way of promoting it to the extent of making a law.
But isn't love a private matter? Why should other people have a say in who I choose to love as an individual?
Yeah, well, you could say that it's a private matter, but as you might be aware, traditionally, love had to be managed. In fact, you cannot marry or have a sexual relationship with a relative, a blood relative of yours. You cannot have sexual relations with your child and vice versa with your parents and so on. Even when it came to people getting married to each other, you know that the love would be expected to come later between those people.
Was there always homosexuality in Africa, or is it a new phenomenon?
No, homosexuality has always been there, but it has never been promoted. It is its promotion that seems to be something that comes from the West.
People like Claire, I mean, are they a threat to African values?
In what way?
She's a lesbian, and you're saying that there are people who see homosexuality as threatening African values, or what the traditional family structure is all about?
Well, I wouldn't use the word threat, except that I would say that it's something that we don't encourage, especially its promotion, because of the reasons I stated, that it goes against the natural order of human conduct.
So it's more than natural order versus un-African, because there are people who are opposed to homosexuality and calling it un-African. If I understood you correctly, said it has always been there.
Its promotion is definitely un-African.
I know you have written and you have actually spoken out against the killing of homosexuals in South Africa, so I concede that. But when people are listening to you saying that it goes up against the natural order, don't you think it encourages violent behavior against homosexuals?
I think the message to the effect that people should not be molested, should not be beaten up, should not be assaulted, should not be killed, it must be promoted by the media as strongly as the media promotes its own point of view.
Whitney, what do you think of that?
Well, I'm glad to hear that that you've criticized attacks on people based on their sexual orientation and gender identity, because fundamentally one of the first things we want is we want the world to be a safe place for everyone. But I think in terms of the language of promotion, let's look at what promotion is. What we're saying is not that we want any special rights whatsoever. What we're actually saying is that as human rights activists, we want every person to fully enjoy all their rights, including the right to marry and found a family. That's not promotion, that's equality, and equality is the goal.
Claire, what do you think? Are traditional values sometimes plain wrong?
As Africans, we have values that we uphold. And I think one of the biggest value or the best value that I grew up knowing about is the spirit of Ubuntu, tolerance, acceptance of people who are different. And as that to me would be the traditional value that I would, embrace and promote. Not the idea of special rights for LGBTI groups, or for the right for gay people to go and kiss on the street, because that is the ideas that come up when for example he talks about promotion. There's that lack of understanding of what promotion means.
Mm-hmm. What does it mean, Prince Holomisa, when you say promotion? What are you talking about?
Well, the first step that we regard as a promotion of homosexuality was the passing of the law of same-sex unions.
Marriage.
Yes. That is a promotion, because now you're even involving the state to come in and facilitate the engagement in this kind of relationship. Of course, the other one, which is obvious, is parading it.
The gay parades that we have?
That kind of thing. But even pushing it in your face, like in those kinds of activities.
Okay, so what's the ethical way to deal with homosexuality?
Well, is to understand why, in the first place, they do things that are unconventional. Why a man would be attracted to another man is something odd, abnormal in the understanding of the common man. We are a people who have connections with our spiritual world, our ancestors. We believe that they communicate with us in a number of ways. We have cultural rites of passage, for instance, that we have to undertake. So sometimes when a person doesn't undergo one or all of those rites of passage, then you find that there are problems. Mm-hmm. So that the ancestors will communicate their displeasure or their dictate that such and such a custom must be performed.
That is the reality of being in Africa, isn't it? There are strong cultures, there are strong belief systems, there are strong traditions. How much of a role does that play in what you found in your report?
Well, I think it's not just in Africa that you see culture, tradition, and religion being used to justify essentially discrimination of people based on their sexual orientation and gender identity. At the point that you start saying, my beliefs mean that you can't marry, that you can't enjoy freedom of expression, that is where it becomes problematic. I also want to point out that in many cultures, interracial marriages was seen as against nature.
So, Claire, I just want to find out, you being an African woman, you are in Uganda, you're a lawyer, you're a lesbian. In terms of your identity as an African, do you think that being who you are is in conflict with African values, or the two are not mutually exclusive?
I think being gay in Africa is as African as the color of my skin. We have homosexuality named in all the traditional, cultures in the whole of Uganda. Each tribe has a name for homosexuality, which simply indicates that this homosexuality is as African as it gets, because you name homosexuals in your tribe. Mm-hmm. That is as traditional as homosexuality gets. So I don't believe in the notion that homosexuality is an African.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you think in countries where homosexuality is criminalized, and some countries going as far as actually introducing an extreme form of punishment like the death penalty, what do you think of that?
Well, I think they are being too extreme to actually criminalize it and even making it punishable by death, because there are ways of rectifying.
Has that happened successfully, where it is rectified or reversed?
Well, I haven't personally come across anyone, but I do consult some of the traditional healers that we have. And they do say that where people have begun to behave in this manner, it has been identified that it is because of the intervention of their ancestors for them to do certain things or not to do certain things. When they are willing to be assisted to abandon this behavior, there is some success that is registered.
Don't you think that when people get the message that there's something wrong with you, you need to be fixed, then it would drive them underground? That perhaps even in those communities that you represent, there are a lot of people who are gay, who are lesbians, but they're not coming out because they know that there will be attempts to fix them.
No, actually, the manner of fixing the problem is not something that has to be done publicly. It is the responsibility of your family members to look after you, to find whatever help they believe you ought to get.
I can't imagine what's worse, being seen as a criminal because I'm out and I'm publicly living out who I am, or being underground and living in the closet, as it were, because I know that there will be hostility to who I am. What did you find in your report? Do people who live in countries where homosexuality is criminalized, do they tend to live with the secret?
I think that what we're seeing in Africa now is more and more people saying, I'm not going to accept this living a lie. I'm not going to accept not being able to just be fully human and enjoy and celebrate both my relationships and celebrate the diversity of what our communities have. And that has accounted somewhat for some of the increase in violence that we've seen.
Claire, in Uganda, what's the situation? Are there a lot of people who are underground, especially after that brutal murder of David Kato?
What society expects from gays and lesbians or transgendered persons. People get married simply to please their parents, or that is the way of fixing, the problem. They get married, but they have, partners on the side. How would then that be correcting homosexuality? We've had cases where a father gives his daughter up to police to correct her through corrective rape, and those are some of the extreme cases that we have found happening, all in the bid to correct this person, because there's a belief that you can fix. So you go to church and this person doesn't change. You go to the traditional healers, this person doesn't change. So people go to those extremes simply because there's fear of that shame from the general public.
So what is the right way to proceed? How do we move forward from here?
We need to find out as to what it is that makes people to behave in this manner.
Wouldn't it be easier if we just left them alone? That's not an option?
Yeah, well, if we leave them alone, they don't live in an island. They don't have a community of their own. They live amongst other people who are heterosexuals.
Mm-hmm. Gay people don't have a problem being gay, so should we not deal with other things as societies and not try to solve a problem that we have identified as the heterosexual world as a problem?
I imagine there wouldn't be that much of a problem if it only involved adults. But then they are children. Children have to be orientated on how they are supposed to conduct themselves in life. And the natural order of things is for a man to have relations with a woman and vice versa.
Don't you have a responsibility as a community leader, as a prince, as a member of parliament, to respond to injustice in every form?
Well, of course, that's why we are opposed to any form of intimidation of homosexuals, their assault and killing and so on. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're opposed to that kind of thing because even to what is called corrective rape, rape is a crime. It doesn't matter against whom it is committed.
Whitley, with what we know, what you've highlighted, the grotesque acts of violence, how do we move forward?
The minute you allow one group of people to become less than human, you create a politics of inequality that actually destroys the whole principle of the inclusiveness of human rights protection and the concept of the equal protection of the law. But why would political leaders want that to happen? Well, they want that to happen because while you're busy worrying about a lesbian who's going to do you no harm, has no intentions to harm you, maybe you're ignoring economic failures, corruption, high crime rates.
Claire, how would you like to see your continent resolving this?
We're not necessarily brought up to hate people who are different from us. So first of all, unlearning these ideologies and choosing to understand the issues, understand who these people are, then decide if you tolerate them or live in peace with them. That is what I would see as the best way forward. Then we can have laws repealed, and leaders speaking out against violence towards the community. But we need to get to a place where we discern, we learn how to understand our neighbor, love our neighbors, and look through, the political agendas of trying to flaunt the homosexual card as one of the worst moral forms of decadence, yet there's so many other things that affect us as Africans.
Well, I think we do agree on one thing. Violence against anybody is unacceptable. Hate crimes against homosexuals, unacceptable anywhere in the world. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, your experiences with us here on South to North. Claire Biarugaba, thank you for joining us. Whitney Brown, thank you for giving us your time. And of course, Prince Patikile Holomisa. Well, that's it for today. Thanks to all our guests and thank you for joining me. Please do tweet your questions, comments and opinions to @AJ South2North or find us on Facebook. Do join me again next week on South to North. Until then, goodbye.